Welcome to Season 4. After finishing the first year 19-0, we've had back-to-back 7-9 seasons, missing out of the playoffs, and tensions are high, as I, the owner, am getting frustrated with the lack of postseason play, which means I may move on from Callahan if this season doesn't go well. This season was the worst it's been when it came to our team revenue. We lost money, not a lot, but enough to make me consider making some big changes if this continues next year. Somehow our fans were consistent throughout the year. I think they like Douglas way more than Nelson, or maybe they're just a big fan of Tuiasa Sopo. Regardless of the support, it may be consistent, but on average we still lost a huge chunk of attendance this past season. The fans are becoming critical, and going 19-0 doesn't mean much 3 years later. Before we go to the coach signings, I want to point out that the coaches do retire in this game. In this case, this coach retired due to age. He was 73. Some coaches retire because they've won too many Super Bowls. Good thing we don't have to worry about that with Callahan. We don't currently have a head coach under contract, but we will be re-signing Callahan. For anyone wondering why we're going to re-sign him, 19-0. Also, as a Dolphins fan, I've seen both Tony Sparano and Joe Philbin get a new contract and fired their first year into it. If you can't tell, the leash on Callahan is really short this season. Playoff push or you're all fired. Tom Moore is still our offensive coordinator for another season. I think he did an excellent job improving this offense. He's given me hope that Douglas can lead this team to the postseason. His contract does end after this year, but barring a complete meltdown on offense, I would like to bring him back. We also don't have a defensive coordinator under contract. Bresnahan was our coordinator since the start of this series. His defense has been top 2 the past 3 seasons. It'd be a mistake not to bring him back. Lastly, our special teams coordinator is Duffman. I think he deserves the benefit of the doubt with, Janikowski getting injured and Feely being terrible. We'll see how he does with a fully healthy Janikowski. Seeing how successful Mark Trestman has been in Buffalo is making me regret not promoting him to our head coaching position the year he left. Oh, what could have been. Moving on to the retirements, I talked about career-ending injuries before. Marshall Faulk ended up getting one. He's just a year younger than Gardner, which is why I think had he not gotten injured in that second year, he wouldn't have regressed as hard, and our offense would have been much more impressive. There was also another interesting career ender, Kevin Hardy with the Giants, a rookie who never got to make a tackle. This is what I'm worried about since rookies tend to have such a low injury rating. We only have 3 retirements this season, which shocks me. I think I underestimated when linemen retire in this game. They seem to last forever. The first retirement is Jason Sehorn. I signed him after Rod Woodson retired, and I knew he wasn't going to last forever, but he's been better than I thought he'd be. A great stopgap player. Charlie Gardner's time was coming. We all knew it. I've done a terrible job preparing for it in terms of drafting a young guy to take over, but we do have the 12th pick again this season. Hopefully it's a good spot to draft his replacement. The final player is Roland Williams. He was never anything special on this team, mainly due to Jolly turning into a stud, but did you know he caught Kurt Warner's first touchdown pass? On the bright side, Kansas City is going to be struggling finding a quarterback with Trent Green retiring this season. Mark Brunell is also retiring. I do think had we traded for him, his rating would not have regressed this hard. It goes to show you, if you don't start games as a veteran, you regress significantly. Here's a good example of it. Remember Badger? I let him walk about 2 seasons ago and he regressed past 50. Play time is huge for older players. We're now in the re-signing period and it seems like every season we have a holdout. This year is Eric Barden. Is there even going to be an argument to be made here? He's a stud. He should be Defensive Player of the Year the past 3 seasons. There's no doubt about it. He's getting a new contract and it helps give us more cap space this season too. At running back, we had Justin Fargas, who needs a new contract. He's still very young, only 26. He's not very good, but he could develop to be better. I also don't like our depth with Henley, so I will be bringing him back. We have two players at wide receiver who need a new contract, Porter and Gabriel. I can tell you right now that Gabriel is not coming back. Porter, on the other hand, had a really good season. He was injured, but when he was healthy, he clearly had an impact. I will be bringing him back on a 4-year deal. Yes, he's expensive, but he's really our only threat at the moment in the passing game besides Jolly. We're looking to be in some trouble at center if we do not re-sign Robbins. Obviously, we're going to bring him back, but he's also up there in age, and you never know when regression is going to hit him hard. We're really just keeping this team together with duct tape and glue at this point. I did want to point out Kennedy is still with the team somehow. On the final year of his contract, I brought this up because I could resign him to a 7-year deal knowing that we won't have to pay all of it and his cap hit would be significantly lower, but I feel it wouldn't be realistic. When players retire in this game, there are no cap hits, which there should be, so I don't want to take advantage of that. At right end, Willie McGinnis continues to take control of that position in his old age, but we still need some depth behind him. You never know when injuries can happen, and I didn't bring back number 59, but I did decide to re-sign Tony Bryant as the backup. At strong safety, Shabazz needs a contract. I'm not going to give him one. Jay Feely also needs a contract, but we have Janikowski, so he's not going to be returning. I think I'm making the right choices on who to bring back. They seem to be obvious choices to me. I released another player. Adam True was in the final year of his contract. There would be a small cap hit, but it was worth it. He regressed a lot, and the money could be useful in free agency this season. Before we move on to the draft, I wanted to show that defensive tackles last forever in this game. Defensive ends too. I do want to say maybe Kennedy retires after this season, but I've been saying that for the past 3 years, so who knows. I also checked out who was going to be a free agent this season, and once again there weren't really any players in positions that I needed, aka running back, which I'm going to have to draft one now. Now, there were two positions I had in mind in the first round this season: wide receiver or running back. Now, I'll tell you right now, all the receivers and running backs that I had wanted were already taken. Each season, we finished just good enough to not get a good pick in the draft. I ended up going for the best projected running back in John Bird. He's not the fastest, nor is he particularly impressive, but he's ours. Well, on the bright spot, he can at least hit his top speed of 3 miles per hour faster than anyone else. Obviously, now in the second round, we're going receiver, right? We drafted right tackle McCormack. I'm getting ready to move on from Kennedy. I think we got a nice steal. It's the second round, so it's not really a steal, but it's better than I expected. With Seahorn's retirement, I figured we need to find some competition for the position at free safety. John Norton, Antivirus, is going to be competing for that job. I think he'll most likely be the starter going into the season. At this point, we draft depth players. I selected a middle linebacker in the 4th. Dwayne Clement is a solid thumper to have in the middle. In the 5th round, we decided to go for another Dwayne Bailey for left outside linebacker. He's a developmental player who will most likely be sitting behind Randy Rogers. With Roland Williams' retirement this season, I decided to draft his replacement in the 6th round. Donald Roberts is not the kind of tight end you draft to catch passes. In the final round, I selected a cornerback, Matt Aiko. I think he has potential. I do like players with low awareness because that's possibly the easiest thing to improve compared to skill attributes. We now move on to free agency, and Favre's a free agent. Why is Brett Favre a free agent? He wasn't there when I checked. I really want to sign Brett Favre. Even if he's a 1-year rental, I think he instantly turns this team into a Super Bowl contender. The problem is, if I sign him, what does that say to Ron Douglas? If we're being realistic here, I can't sign him, but I really want to sign him. Okay, look, I do know I want to sign Rashae Caldwell. We don't really have a solid third receiver on the team, plus with the way injuries went last season, I would rather have some more depth at this position, even if it costs a pretty penny or two. It looks like Favre is going to go back to the Packers, but oh man, do I want to sign him to this team? I really want him. But this situation isn't Aaron Rodgers, Zach Wilson. This is more like Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, if the Packers decide to keep him. I trust my young guy. I'm handing him the keys. Please don't make me regret it. Caldwell also accepted our offer, a 5-year deal worth $17 million. He's going to be our number 2 or 3 this season. I decided to fully pass on Favre and move on. Let's hurry up. Let's go to year 4. Don't make me regret this. Last season, Shane Leckler led the elite class. This year is the same. He did improve, and he's very close to being in the 99 club, and I give it a year. I saw how long cornerbacks stay in their prime, and Troy Vincent was still very good up until the age of 36. I think Woodson can perform at a high level for at least another 5 seasons. Is there really much I need to say about Eric Barden? He's a playmaker on this defense. I don't expect any less this season. Seabass was injured last season. I don't know how he got hurt. Someone must have broken his leg with a lead pipe because it wasn't on the field. Thankfully, there was no regression. Last year was the first time that I felt Napoleon Harris played up to his rating. This year, he graded out even better. The linebackers, heck, the entire defense is dominating. The last player on the elite list is Roderick Coleman. He's at the age of 30 and his acceleration is getting better. This man is not human. It's nice to know that these players play up to the age of 38. Well, at least linemen. At quarterback, Ron Douglas has improved a lot. I'm very happy with his development so far. In a season or 2, I can see him getting into the 90s. This is why I didn't want to sign Favre to stop his development. Also, what the heck, Tuiasosopo? He's become a liability even as a backup. I don't expect him back next season. It's so strange not to see Gardner on the roster anymore. Clearly, this position is the worst it's been since we've started. Here's hoping the combination of Bird and Fargas can produce something. I'm not super confident, but best case scenario is we're developing Bird for the future. At fullback, Erickson is improving. I didn't realize how old he was when we drafted him. He's barely going into his second year and he's 24. I think they retire in the early 30s. When I signed Caldwell this season, I did it mainly because nobody progressed on this team. I don't understand why this position continues to regress. I guess injuries to White and Porter last season could be why they regressed, but they're still young. I wasn't expecting them to continue this downward trend. This has been a problem since Rice and Brown retired. If there's one positive to take out of the receiving group, it's the tight end. Jolly has been the bright spot in terms of progression, but hold on. Teo Johnson improved slightly. I've been waiting for him to improve since year 1. He's still very young. At left tackle, Sims has been a consistently good protector for our team. I had plans to make Walker a starter once Kennedy retired, but he's beginning to regress, and I'm losing trust having him start there now. While Douglas is, well, he's there. Middleton is beginning to regress at left guard. I believe he was injured last season. That's the only reason I can see why he would have dropped off, but he's still very good. Shouldn't be an issue. If you're wondering why I'm going through these quicker than normal, I think we all know this team at this point, but I just want to show any progression, regression, none here. At right guard, Collins continues to be a solid player. The offensive line over the past 4 years has been good, but they have been allowing more sacks each season. I wonder if that has to do to their age catching up to them. Kennedy is the oldest on the line and he's clearly regressed, no longer elite, but he's still very good. I am preparing to move on from him with McCormack. At left end, number 98 was injured last season. He had a good performance the year before, but I'm thinking that injury slowed down the progression he would have had this season. Either way, he's still the best left defensive end in this series. I trust him. There can't be that many years left in Willie McGinnis. He's still the best player in this position, but we're going to need to find his replacement soon. Bryant is just not good enough. At defensive tackle, everyone is over the age of 30. It's so bizarre to see players so old still performing well, but this is where we're at now. I wonder if the ratings toughness injury has something to do with regression as well, since Mozzarella Perella had been injured a lot, but he seems fine. It was nice seeing Johnson in the 70s for a while, but he's now back in the 60s, but let's be honest here. We have to hope neither of these players see the field because Randy Rogers is just that much of a better option. I know what you're thinking. Why did I draft that linebacker? Mainly because Smith is on the final year of his contract, and with him being a backup, also 30 years, it might be better to move on. Besides, Harris is the clear starter. No one in this group is going to take over that spot. I wonder how much other players influence progression, because everyone here improved way more than I thought they should. Barden is amazing, Rogers is becoming my favorite draft pick, and Baker is beginning to cook. Well, he's simmering. I think I really screwed up by not having Nnamdi Asomugha start as the nickel corner at the start of the series. He's still very young, plus Woodson and Buchanan continuing their progression. It doesn't hurt as much. He can still learn behind them if any of those three go down. I don't feel so confident though. With the retirement of Seahorn, we're in a pickle. I don't expect the entire defense to fall off due to one position. He's a free safety after all. They're more about playmaking in my opinion. We have two lockdown corners. We've been really good at stopping the pass game. If anything, it's a luxury to develop a young guy with experienced players around him. You remember when I said Gibson was the worst player in our secondary? This is why I'm okay with Norton or Jackson starting at free safety. The other positions can clean up any mistakes they make. Lastly, Sebastian Janikowski is the kicker, Shane Leckler the punter. I did have second thoughts of keeping some of the players on the current roster. Big sexy Keon Nash was released, and so was Eric Kelly. I regret signing him. I was also curious to see if I could trade for a playmaker with my first round pick. The Giants were willing to trade Amani Toomer to us, but I decided to hold off on this trade for now. I wanted to see how the team performs first before making a big trade. And after simulating the preseason, I am happy to announce there are no injuries going into this year. So we begin our fourth season against the Baltimore Ravens. Ron Douglas once again wins the season opener. It wasn't a high scoring affair, but he manages the game well enough for us. The running game, on the other hand, looks like a complete disaster. We also got away with Stover missing 3 kicks for the Ravens. Clearly, we survived this game more than anything else. We now have our first divisional matchup against the Denver Broncos for week 2. Just kick, baby. We were able to get inside the 20 a few times, but just not able to punch it in, making me think that we need to upgrade our running game. Douglas had a rough game, 2 interceptions, no touchdowns. How much of that was due to a bad running game? They did do better this week, but I mean, the longest run we had was like 7 yards. We need an explosive back. The passing game is fine enough, but it's going to be harder to pass when the defense knows you can't run. Hey, look, Porter is on the injury list. Who would have known? I think it's time to move on from him. I know I gave him that contract, but this dude can't stay healthy. We now have our home opener against the New England Patriots for week 3. Another low-scoring game. This time we were on the losing end of it. Ron Douglas continues his rough start to the season. The team finally had a decent rushing attack this week, but refused to run it more, and even with the score being close, while Des White stepped up in Porter's absence, but at the same time you have to think, could we have won if we ran more? Can the Raiders stop the losing streak against the Rams this week? This offense is terrible, like really bad. Like 1 touchdown could have won this game. They scored no touchdowns. The defense did its best, but wow, was this awful. Both Douglas and Tuiasosopo performed poorly. 3 interceptions combined, another rough game on the ground. Charlie Gardner wasn't great anymore, but he wasn't this bad, while Rashae Caldwell this time stepped up in Porter's absence. With the poor performance by Douglas, I figured he needed more help from his receivers, so I went back to the Giants with the same offer in the preseason, and they rejected it. They didn't want it anymore. I should have made this trade. I should have made it earlier, but my hesitation screwed me again. Imagine if we had signed Favre and had Toomer on this team. I really need to start committing more. I wasn't done looking for trades. We needed a running back and I thought Larry Johnson would help. I know most people would cringe at an in-division trade, but we're desperate. The coach is basically fighting for his job at this point. He needs things to start going right, and making this trade is his hope that he turns things around. It was for a high price, stranger. It was for our first round pick. This better make for a nice 1-2 punch, or else I'm going to start firing people. We now have our rematch against the undefeated Broncos. They embarrassed us in the first matchup. At this point, if we don't win, I might consider blowing up the team before the trade deadline. I don't like the fact that we keep letting teams come back late in games, but we held out. This game keeps us one game behind the division lead, and Ron Douglas had a pretty good performance. I don't know if Larry Johnson helped because the running game was still bad. We did get our first rushing touchdown, so thanks. It's been 3 weeks and Jerry Porter is still not off the injury list. I think I'm going to move on from him this offseason, or at least find someone more reliable. I will say, we haven't had the easiest schedule. After the bye week, we take on the undefeated Seahawks, and like I said earlier, this team has a tendency to let teams come back. This time, they weren't able to win, unlike last time, and now we're sitting at 2-4. I will say Douglas has been having a slump this season, but I think he's been better since we got Johnson on the team, which is strange since Johnson hasn't exactly been lighting it up this past 2 games, but he has scored twice. Rough schedule, undefeated Seahawks last week, 1 loss Jaguars this week, and both of them are away games. I think this team has hit a new low. We lost by taking a safety. Douglas had one of the worst games this season, and how much of that was because Johnson ended up missing most of it, while Janikowski missed 2 field goals, a completely winnable game that we ended up losing somehow. To make matters worse, Nnamdi Asomugha is now out for the season. Also, how the heck is Porter still on the injury report? We need to put him in bubble wrap when he gets on the field. We're now getting to the midway point of the season, and let's be honest, this is probably the best chance we have to winning a game in a while. Against the Steelers, I don't think we're a good team. Again, we let teams come back in the second half. I wonder if it has anything to do with players getting injured and not finishing the game. I'm not sure. Ron Douglas had an okay game, but more surprisingly, with Asomugha out, we couldn't stop all 3 of the Steelers quarterbacks from passing on us. This was also Johnson's best game so far, which isn't really saying much. This offense was trouble when we first walked in, but this defense is beginning to fall apart. We're 2-6 on the season, and believe it or not, if we win, we'll be 1 game down from the division lead. We had a chance and we failed. It's getting to a point for me that I don't know what to do. We traded our first to Casey, which looks to be a good pick. Our quarterback is struggling, we have no weapons, the defense is falling apart, and our pets' heads are falling off. I think we need to blow it all up, do a tank year on purpose, and start over. At this point, we're not winning for anything more than just to screw over the Chiefs in drafting position. Looks like that's the motivation we needed to get this team going again. Douglas had his best performance of the season. Bird is the word, but I've noticed that Johnson has been leaving games early. Best case scenario, we have 2 good running backs that can come in for one another, or we just have a really injury-prone backfield. We have never lost to the Chargers in this series, and I'm not feeling very confident about this one. You know, we had a chance. Once again, Douglas was very not good, but I think the running game is getting better. I could just be fooling myself. We're now 3-8 taking on the 3-8 Cardinals. We need a win to push our draft pick back. This must have been a fun game to watch, a game-winning drive capped off by Larry Johnson. Ron Douglas has another subpar game, but that's okay because for the first time this season, Larry Johnson was playing like a first-round pick. Oh, great. Now we can get our butts handed to us again by the Chargers. Douglas had his worst game. Is he the future? I have noticed that against good teams, we suck, and against bad teams, we put up some good games. I wonder what that means. It probably means we suck. We now have our rematch against the Chiefs, our chance to worsen the draft pick and potentially eliminate them from the division title. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think we suck. We don't have excuses this season. Injuries in year 2 and 3 derailed the team, but other than Asamoah this season, we've been healthy. Douglas hasn't been helping with his play this season though. I just really don't want to give the Chiefs a good draft pick. We need to win these final 2 games. Well, we beat Cincinnati. Douglas continues his season of mediocre play. I like the 1-2 punch of Bird and Johnson though. At least when we play weaker teams, we do well enough. Final game of the year, and I think the only team we beat with a winning record was the Broncos. Can we make our draft pick worse? This was our Super Bowl. Yeah, we finished the year 6-10, but we started 2-7, and I call that a win. It was still a bad year, but we hopefully got out of the top 10 with that win, and John Bird scored the final touchdown in the game with only 27 seconds left. Douglas continues to make me regret giving him the keys to the team. Why did I do that? John Bird went off in this game while Larry Johnson was out with an injury. We had 10 games this season that were 1-score games. We lost 6 of them. Good teams don't lose that many, and surprisingly, the only team with a winning record at the end of the season that we beat were the Ravens. So I guess we were good. I have no clue. Maybe I should have benched Douglas, but I did that with Tuiasosopo in year 2 and it didn't work out well, and I didn't want to make the same mistake again. Maybe it was a mistake to keep him in. He's more than likely to start again for the team next season in the tank year. Best case scenario, he improves and shows me that he is the guy. Worst case scenario, he proves he's this guy and not very good, and we finish with a terrible record that allows us to replace him in the draft. The running game was better this year, especially how it started. I like Bird as a project player to develop behind Johnson. I know this trade may seem like a terrible one, because it was, but I think in a year or 2, Johnson can become an elite player on this team. With him and Bird, they could be very unstoppable. Doug Jolly led the team in catches, but surprisingly, or maybe not, Caldwell led the team in yards. I'm glad I signed him this past offseason because Porter has been such a liability. It was nice to see a receiver not get injured and miss time. Jolly continues to perform better and better each season, earned himself another Pro Bowl this year, and he's becoming my favorite offensive player for this team. The thing about Porter is that he's good. Like when he's on the field, he's good, but he's never on the field enough. That's why I might have to move on from him this coming offseason. Des White is a solid number 3. I do like him as a player that can come in if an injury occurs, but with his regression each season on this team, I might have to move on from him too. I really thought Robinson was going to progress going into year 2, but he didn't improve at all. He's looking like a career backup at this point, but he's still productive enough in that spot. I think it's clear that Kennedy has lost a step or 2. We'll be moving on from him regardless if he returns for another season or not. Napoleon Harris led the team in tackles this season. Looks like he's coming back to reality. He had that really good season last year. To be fair, I think the entire team had a down year this year. Eric Barden had no interceptions for the first time in this series. His performance was still good, but not what I'm used to seeing out of him. I have no clue what happened to this team. Barden led in sacks, but the next man up was Mozzarella Perella. He may be old, but he's still performing really well in his late career. He also played the entire season this time. Willie McGinnis is wild to me. He keeps getting better and better too. It's going to be really hard to let these old veterans walk when I'm trying to tank next season. My favorite draft pick, Randy Rogers, continues to be consistent on defense. I think in a few years we can have an all-elite linebacker core. 98 was injured last season and just came back as if nothing happened. I'm really looking forward to see how he does during the tank year. Philip Buchanan had his best season this year. It's so bizarre. I don't understand how this defense struggled so badly. Seahorn retired, but with Asamoah out, that just fell apart. Gibson had a bounce back year. I don't really get what happened with this defense. Bresnahan is about to get the pink slip. Looks like Duffman may also be on his way out because Janikowski performed very poorly. I get that he was injured last season, but that's a big drop off in performance. Leckler even performed worse as a punter. Everyone's getting fired. Everyone. Take a last look at Callahan because he's not going to be back on the team in season 5. This was a complete meltdown from top to bottom. He gave us 19-0, but how much of that was him? Priest Holmes won MVP. We took his backup. Look who was second in voting. Brett Favre, the guy I wanted to sign. He had a really good season, and I can't believe I didn't give him an offer and trade for Toomer. We could have had an explosive offense this year. Instead, I traded for Larry Johnson. We didn't even have that many Raiders for awards. Gibson was 5th for DB. I'd argue Buchanan was better, but whatever. Janikowski was 4th for best kicker, and that was being generous. He shouldn't even be on this list. Trestman was also back in the playoffs with the Bills. I'm rooting for him. I personally hate the Bills, but for this series, I hate the Chiefs more. They absolutely mollywopped them. Now they take on the San Diego Chargers in the divisional round. Can Trestman do us another solid and beat them? It came down to the final seconds in the game, but they kicked the game winner to go on to the AFC Championship for the 2nd straight season, where they take on the only team with a winning record that we beat, the Baltimore Ravens. Another close game that came down to a Ryan Lindell kick to send the Buffalo Bills to the Super Bowl, where they would face the Green Bay Packers. Our former offensive coordinator went to the Super Bowl to play against the quarterback that we should have signed this past offseason. It looks like we made the mistake of not giving Trestman the head coaching job. Obviously, we just came off of the 19-0 season, so why would we change coaches? But Trestman took a mediocre Bills team from Greg Williams and took them to 2 conference championships and a Super Bowl win. This just made me want to blow up the team even harder.